Thank you. Do you guys remember the day that you found out that imaginary numbers were real? Or I guess that they weren't real, but we had to care about them anyways. And the whole thing just felt like explaining to someone who'd never heard of Christmas before why we teach our kids that Santa Claus exists. Just like, look, we all know Santa Claus isn't real. He's imaginary. But he is a very useful model to explaining to your kids why they didn't get what they wanted for Christmas. You just show them the North Pole diagram, explain that too many points of their behavior fell on the naughty axis. This caused all the reindeer to lose flight based on the Rudolph flight equation, and Santa crashed and burned in a fire. So now you get coal as a reminder of the time you killed Santa Claus and ruined Christmas forever. But you know, there is a real component to Santa Claus. He's not all imaginary, he's complex. And you know, if you just factor out the elves, the flying sleigh, you know, the idea that people care, you're just left with a grumpy, overweight man who got their kids coal for Christmas because they were being punks. And that's all of our dads. And that's what the entire lesson on imaginary numbers felt like. Nobody really understood what was happening, but you just left out milk and cookies for Euler, and your calculator spat out the right answer. So I once had a professor who made us do all of our lab write-ups in a physical notebook. Now normally, this would have bothered me a lot, because I'm an electrical engineering student in the 21st century, and my people literally invented the computer because we could not read our own handwriting. But in this case, all of the lab work was done on a computer, and it had to be turned in on Learning Suite on a computer. And the process of going from computer to not computer, back to computer, meant that you had to print out everything, like cut it out, paste it into a lab notebook, painstakingly write out a legible report with a pen like a 15th century peasant, and then scan page by page the entire thing back into the computer, compile it all into a PDF, and turn it into Learning Suite. And at this point, I wasn't sure if this professor just hated happiness or if he just didn't know that you could copy and paste a picture into a Word document. But you know, one day when my boss asked me to turn in a Play-Doh model of my 3D CAD design, I'm going to be grateful I had a professor who was willing to teach me how the real world works. So I once asked a girl if she wanted to date me, and she said she wasn't sure because things were too complicated. So I said, here, let me simplify it for you. Imagine you're a frictionless sphere in a vacuum. And another sphere collides with you perfectly in an elastic collision, ignoring heat loss, electric charge, gravity, the existence of other men, and the fact that I just referred to both of our shapes as spherical. Do you want to date me? She said no. Turns out it made things a lot simpler. So I work in BYU's clean room. Has anyone here seen the clean room? Yeah. All right, it's that like weird room on the 4th floor of the Clyde building where like half of it has normal lights and half of it has these like weird orange lights, like it's split into paradise and prison. And to go in, you have to wear this weird coverall suit that just looks like a graph paper onesie. And they didn't want to make them too embarrassing, so they called it a bunny suit. And in order to even like go in there, I had to go through extensive safety training, which is probably a good thing because I legitimately got an email, like 100% true story. Got an email one day saying that there had been a chemical spill and they hoped the floor would re-solidify soon. Now I know that there are 3 states of matter, but floor should only have 1 state of matter. So yeah, I had to do the safety training, and 10% of it was actually like useful advice, like good procedure, And 90% of it was just warnings about how dangerous hydrofluoric acid was. It would just be like, there are lots of dangerous chemicals in the clean room. One of them is hydrofluoric acid. Hydrofluoric acid will leave the calcium in your bones and leave you to die a slow and painful death over the next 24 hours. It's like, okay, that's cool. Then you move on and it's like, be sure to use the proper glassware for the chemicals that you're using, especially with hydrofluoric acid. Hydrofluoric acid will eat all of your bones and leave you flopping around on the floor like that time that Harry Potter's arm disappeared. While people mock you. And be like, once you're done using a hot plate, be sure to turn it off. Otherwise, hydrofluoric acid will hunt down everyone you love. And only after you have nothing and no one left will it come to you and grant you a merciful death. If you are the last one to leave the clean room, turn the lights off. But not before you offer a sacrifice to hydrofluoric acid. This may sound like idolatry. It is. But in the last 3 years, we only forgot it one time, and we had to wait for days for the floor to re-solidify. Do you guys remember that time when people told you that math was going to be useful, and you believed them because you were going to be a STEM major? Well, let me tell you, I almost have a PhD in electrical engineering, and I almost never use math anymore. But there are a lot of things that I do use all the time that nobody ever taught me that I had to figure out for myself. And so I have compiled a list of things that we should be teaching people other than mathematics that will prepare them for the real world. Browsing Wikipedia. Pretending Wikipedia wasn't your primary source of research. Being able to guess what acronyms stand for. Switching to a different research project because at this point it's too embarrassing to ask what the acronyms stand for. Taking credit for other people's ideas. Being polite to those people so that they don't realize that you stole their ideas. Getting an undergrad to do most of the work. Some of you guys are that undergrad. I would apologize, but I've been there and I'm not sorry. Sticking and unsticking one side of two-sided tape so that it becomes one-sided tape so that you don't have to walk across the room to get the regular one-sided tape for your laser setup. Acting disappointed when the machine you need to reuse for your research breaks down so that people don't think that it was your fault when you just go home and watch Netflix. Using nail polish as an anti-reflective layer because you don't actually understand how light works. How to approach a girl. Taking classes outside of your major so that you can actually meet girls. Downloading Mutual because girls don't want to talk to you anyways. Alright, thanks guys.